A new fire station. I remember when Clearfield Borough kept their fire trucks in four separate buildings, one in each ward. The fire station in Third Ward was located in the first block of Northwest Front Street near the intersection with Nickel Street. The people of West Side who lived west of the railroad, which runs on William Street, were concerned about the lack of fire protection if and when a long train blocked all the crossings during a fire in their vicinity. Those residents pressured the Borough Council for years to locate some fire trucks to the west of the railroad tracks. Finally, the council purchased an empty lot at the corner of Martin and Park Streets and authorized the selection of an architect to design a new fire station. Sam Natoli, a former resident of Clearfield, was the architect chosen to plan a building to suit the lot. Through the bidding process, the Bowers building firm was assigned as contractor for the construction. The people of West Side were thankful, and some of them said their fire insurance premiums were reduced. Walking to school. I remember when Clearfield Borough had 3 grade school buildings, each having grades 1 through 5. First and second ward children walked to lettered grade school in First Ward, while third and fourth ward students went to their respective schools. The villages around and nearby Clearfield in Lawrence Township also had their own buildings. They were Plimptonville, Hillsdale, Curradition, and Hyde. None of these schools had school bus service, so we all walked to school, not once, but twice a day, because, you see, we walked home for lunch, fall, winter, and spring. The children didn't complain. They just walked like all the older kids did before them. When we finished grade school, we were grouped together in one building, first in junior high and then senior high school in downtown Clearfield. In time, we were joined by students from Woodland, Bigler, Frenchville, Goshen, and Glen Ritchie. Those students rode a school bus. We local students kept walking. But I give credit to all that walking for healthy bodies and weight controls. In my 12 years of schooling, I can't recall any of those students as being obese or hardly even overweight. Come on, let's go for a walk. Backyard clotheslines. I remember when, back in the 1930s, almost every housewife had an outside clothesline in her backyard. Almost all of those clotheslines have now disappeared, having been replaced by indoor automatic clothes dryers. Clotheslines were made of steel wire or cotton rope and stretched between wooden or steel posts, and quite often had 3 parallel lines mounted on cross arms on the posts. Several accessories were needed for hanging clothes on the line. The most obvious were the clothes pins. The pincher type with a steel spring or the all-wood pin. Long clothesline props were needed to push up and hold the clothesline, which sagged from the weight of the clothing hanging on the line. The props were usually made from 1x3 lumber with a V-notch cut into the top. A clothespin apron or bag was used to hold the pins as the clothes were hung up or taken down. And of course, a clothes basket was needed to carry the clothes to and from the line. Monday morning was wash day for most housewives. They carried the clothes basket outside and took a damp cloth to wipe the clothesline free of soot from the many coal furnace chimneys. Most clothing was hung from the waist of the garment. That is, men's t-shirts were hung upside down and their shorts were hung right side up, generally with 2 clothespins. To save using so many pins, some women clipped the adjoining garments with just 1 pin. Today, some housewives still prefer a clothesline over the automatic dryer. They feel that their clothes are much fresher if hung in the sunshine and the cool breezes. Chimes from Trinity Methodist Church. I remember when, maybe 75 years ago, most of the boys living on the west side of Clearfield spent a lot of time exploring the nearby hills during the summer vacation months. There were lots of well-trampled paths you could follow to different areas of the hill, and we knew every turn by heart. There was also the remains of some old tram roads where native logs were hauled down the hill to be floated down to the river to sawmills at Williamsport and beyond. The hill was a fascinating place to learn about nature with several different species of trees and bushes, berries, rabbits and other small game, even some harmless snakes, and an open, abandoned stone quarry. If we became thirsty, we knew where the nearest spring was located with its pure, clear, and cool water. One late afternoon, when I should have been running home for supper, I instead sat down to rest on a slope and observed the view of Paradise and Mill Road. A very light wind was coming from the south over Clearfield. The atmosphere was pleasantly still and quiet. Then I became aware that I was hearing chimes coming from the Clearfield vicinity. I strained my ears to determine that the hymn I was hearing was "How Great Thou Art." I was thrilled. That moment was one of the most exciting yet humbling experience in my long lifetime. I couldn't move until the chimes stopped. I was amazed that the sound had traveled almost 2 miles to me from the Trinity Methodist Church at the corner of South 2nd and Walnut Streets, the first church in Clearfield to have chimes. They had also told me that it was 5 o'clock and supper was already on the table. Pennsylvania wildflowers. I remember when many nearby farmers were still using draft horses on the farm because they didn't have money enough to buy tractors during the financial depression of the 30s. After World War II, horses disappeared from farms. At the same time, some of the farmland became unproductive, and Mother Nature took over and began growing fields of goldenrod. Today, more of our farmland is being farmed again to grow corn to feed our recently opened ethanol plant. However, if you travel our countryside roads to places like Frenchville, Crampin, or Glen Ritchie, especially during the month of September, you can still see many huge fields of brilliant yellow goldenrod. I tell you, these plants are not weeds. They are Pennsylvania wildflowers. The same can be said about dandelions. Most people think of them as weeds, but they are not weeds. They are Pennsylvania wildflowers. Remind your neighbor that those couple of small yellow spots in his lawn look nice. They are bright yellow and are enhanced by the luxurious green background of his grass. They are not weeds, but it all depends upon your own perspective. Are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? I say goldenrod and dandelions are wildflowers, not weeds. Paint on slate tiles. I remember when many houses were protected from rain with slate roofs. The slate was obtained from quarries at or near the surface of the earth, and thus was inexpensive because there were no need for heavy machinery to uncover the seams. As slate shingles became more expensive to obtain, roofers began using asphalt roofing to protect housetops. Very recently, the asphalt shingles are being replaced for weather protection by painted metal panels, which are coated with a special long-lasting paint to keep them from rusting forever. Slate shingles were manufactured by simply cutting them to a common size and then holes for nails.
Unknown caller.
Slate shingles were manufactured by simply cutting them to a common size, and then holes for nails were punched in them either at the quarry or on the job site. The lifespan of a slate roof was 50 years or so. Sometimes a single piece of slate was found to have become broken on a house roof and needed to be replaced. Most roofers and contractors kept a supply of good used slate shingles, often from a slate Most roofers and contractors kept a supply of good used slate shingles, often from a slate removal project to use in replacing those broken slate pieces. One of Clearfield's amateur artists, Mrs. Zayden Castillo, inquired one day about the availability of used slate shingles. I gave her more than she wanted or could carry. She took them to Florida, where she and her artistic friends enjoyed painting them during the winter months. When she and her husband returned to Clearfield in springtime, they brought us some oranges and also one of the pieces of slate with her personal version of our home painted on it. There was a rawhide thong fastened through the nail holes for hanging the picture on the wall. Evelyn and I decided to display it on the wall over the headboard of our bed. It remained there for several years until the leather thong dried out and rotted. The slate fell to the floor in the middle of the night with such a loud noise that we both jumped up and landed on our feet on opposite sides of the bed. We didn't wait until daylight to decide to rehang our slate painting elsewhere in the house. Wall clock. I remember when I first heard about Wall. His real name was Walter, and some people called him Walt or maybe Wally, but most of his friends simply called him by his nickname, Wall. When he grew up and then married, he was planning on raising some boys, but that never happened. He and his wife were blessed with 3 fine girls. Wall decided that his wife should select the names of their girls and he would pick names for the boys, if and when they ever had any. Their first daughter was named Tina. A few years later, the second girl was born and named Nina. after a friend of Wall's wife. The youngest daughter was named Ada, which was an old family name. Tina, Nina, and Ada. Now, would you believe that their surname was Clock? Well, that's how Wall got his nickname, Wall Clock. Oh, yes, and their children's names are 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and Tina Clock. I hope you don't think this is a true story, because it isn't. Just a tall story or a fairy tale. However, I might say that the three girls certainly enjoyed referring to their dad's father as our grandfather Clock. Pen pals. That's it. Pen pals. I remember when young American schoolgirls enjoyed communicating with English-speaking girls in foreign countries. The process or custom was known as pen pals and was started and implemented by English teachers in the school system. They acquired the names, addresses, and ages of girls in various other countries and then assigned those names to girl students in the USA. I don't remember a similar program for boys. My oldest sister, Rebecca, had a pen pal from the Philippine Islands who lived on the big island of Mindanao. We looked on a world map to see where that was. Her pen pal wrote about her family, her school, and her friends and country. I think the correspondence continued on for 3 or 4 years. Although my sister allowed me to read some of the letters, I can't recall her pen pal's name. The content of the letters didn't excite me much, but the different stamps on the envelopes stirred my fascination at the age of 12 or 13. They looked different than the postage stamps I was accustomed to seeing. Rebecca gave me 2 of the stamps to show my schoolmates, and then I saved them in my dresser drawer. Pen pals is one of the many wonderful things that I like remembering from the good old days. Bakery carts. I remember when I made a huge mistake. Well, we all have made errors or mistakes now and then, some of them costly or maybe just embarrassing. I recall this particular one very well because it was not costly, but in fact turned out to be financially beneficial. I was estimating a bid price on 2 cold storage buildings for the Pennsylvania Department of Forests and Waters. They wanted to store over the winter months 1 million tree seedlings in each of the buildings. The seedlings were to be stored on 50 metal carts per building. They were 6 feet high and used mostly by the bakery industry for holding baked products. Every cart had 10 loose or removable steel shelves or trays for a total of 1,000 trays for the two buildings. My first effort in computing our bid price was to contact the manufacturer of the specified bakery carts to obtain their cost figure. All the other bidders were given the same cost figure based on the information I sent to the cart manufacturer. Now, back to my blunder. We were declared the successful bidder on the two buildings and subsequently got construction started. We submitted shop drawings for the bakery carts and shelves to the architect for approval. He stated that the shelving was not to be included because the Pennsylvania Department of Forest Waters always built their own trays themselves out of wood. My error was in not reading the original specifications thoroughly enough where it said no shelves. That mistake saved us the price of buying 1,000 steel trays or shelves. From trails to highways. I don't remember the time when Indians occupied the clear fields of Chiclacamoose here along the Susquehanna River, because I'm not that old. History tells us that when they did live here, they had no need to travel much or to engage in trade because they were self-sufficient. They did have footpaths to get to other areas occupied by other tribes far and wide. Those paths were widened into trails when white men arrived from Europe with horse-drawn wagons. The trails along rivers and streams were better suited for wagon travel because they were more flat with only a few steep grades. In wet weather, these trails became muddy with many ruts, which made traveling difficult. That and the invention of the automobile made it necessary to fix the trails into better passageways, and then they became known as roads. These roads were paved with stone, topped with asphalt, or maybe poured concrete, and then had to be widened because the traffic was traveling at higher speeds. The roads led from one town directly into the center of the next town. More people began traveling long distances, and with the congestion and stop signs in towns creating delays, it became necessary to construct bypass routes around the towns. These bypasses helped relieve communities from heavy traffic, truck traffic in the towns. Now we have interstate highways, which are in fact bypassing the bypasses. They were needed because larger trucks became economical for hauling freight long distances in competition with railroads. So, from the early Indian paths to trails to dirt roads to paved roads to bypasses to interstate highways, we come to the present time. I sometimes wonder what's coming next. Larissa's prayer. I remember when my grandchildren were very young and fragile and giggly and precious. That's the word, precious. All grandparents instinctively know that all their young grandchildren are precious and very lovable, even when their frequent boo-boos bring them to tears. One of the rewards of becoming elderly is the opportunity to observe your grandchildren as they grow from infants into adults over time, and then start that process all over again with great-grandchildren. Life keeps getting better and better. One of my best memories out of so many is the one I recall often about a short children's prayer expressed years ago by my granddaughter Larissa when she was about 4 or 5 years old. This was before she could pronounce R's. This was before she could pronounce R's correctly. I can close my eyes and hear her child. I'm going to start completely over.
All right.
Larissa's prayer. I remember when my grandchildren were very young and fragile and giggly and precious. That's the word, precious. All grandparents instinctively know that all their young grandchildren are precious and very lovable, even when their frequent boo-boos bring them to tears. One of the rewards of becoming elderly is the opportunity to observe your grandchildren as they grow from infants into adults over time, and then start that process all over again with great-grandchildren. Life keeps getting better and better. One of my best memories out of so many is the one I recall often about a short children's prayer expressed years ago by my granddaughter Larissa when she was about 4 or 5 years old. This was before she could pronounce the letter R correctly. I can close my eyes and hear her childly voice as she sings. God our Father, once again, we will ask your blessing. We will ask your blessing. Amen. Amen. She would offer that prayer willingly at appropriate times, and that childish prayer reminds me that God is always listening. Larissa and David have 2 wonderful children who are now approaching that same age. The Keystone Ice Cream Company. I remember when ice cream cones were a special treat for kids on hot summer afternoons. The Keystone Ice Cream Company on Bridge Street made some of the best ice cream you could buy. The company was operated from 1912 until 1961 by brothers John and Foster Woods. Many of their family members worked for the company. John, by the way, was one of my pinnacle friends playing at the Third Ward Hose Company way back when. Keystone made 25 different flavors of ice cream. They always started with their same special baked basic ingredients and then added one of their main flavors. One of my favorite flavors is White House, a vanilla concoction with bright red cherries embedded in it. Karen Rankin, a granddaughter, says that daughters and grandchildren help to remove the cherry stems and pits before the cherries were mixed into the ice cream. Delicious. Their ice cream cones were considered special because they put a coupon in the bottom of each one. If your coupon said winner, you could redeem it for a free ice cream cone. Also, their store sold chocolate-covered ice cream on a stick. The ice cream was placed in a mold and a stick was inserted as the ice cream solidified. The ice cream was removed from the mold, then to be dipped in a liquid chocolate coating and refrozen, ready to eat and treat. However, my most vivid memories of the company were about their ice manufacturing operation. They made ice cubes, but only in a 100-pound weight, about 12 inches by 12 inches by 24 inches in size. There was a trough of brine water set into the floor. The temperature of the brine was reduced to the low 20s Fahrenheit. Stainless steel rectangular tubs holding 100 pounds of water were placed in the brine trough, and the water would freeze into 100 pounds of ice. The tubs were then removed from the brine, and the ice blocks were carried into an insulated storage room. Homes in the 30s didn't have refrigerators. They had ice boxes to keep food from spoiling. They were about the size of small refrigerators with a large compartment to hold the block of ice and a pan below to catch the water as the ice melted. The Iceman delivered the ice on his route in a pickup truck with an insulated wooden floor. He had a tarp to cover the ice cakes to keep out the hot sunshine. His customers had a square car with a hole in each corner, which they hung on a nail by their front door with a pointy end up. All four holes had a different number on them, 100, 50, 25, or 10, to indicate how much ice he was to deliver to their icebox. The Iceman used an ice pick to chip apart the size requested, and using ice tongs, carried it into the house. While cutting off the block of ice for his customer, there were times when small pieces, smaller than your hand, would break off and stay on the truck bed. Kids loved to grab these pieces for a cool treat. I remember the Iceman never left his ice pick on a truck, so we kids could not make more ice chips. James E. Strates shows. I remember when, about this time of year, the James E. Strates shows began appearing at the Clearfield County Fair at the Clearfield Driving Park. They arrived on the Pennsylvania Railroad line, which ran through Clearfield's downtown area. The railroad flat cars were stopped along 3rd Street, so the wagons hauling the rides and shows could be unloaded and moved to the fairground. Large farm tractors were the first to be unloaded down the ramps at the end of the first car. Flat ramps were placed between the cars so that a tractor could pull the wagons forward from car to car to the location of the down ramps and be downloaded. Most of the tractors were involved in transporting the wagons across the Nichols Street Bridge to the fairground. Unloading the train was something special and different for people to see. Dads brought their kids to watch even when the train arrived after bedtime. Strates shows had elephants, and they walked to the fairground, partly because they needed exercise after being confined in a rail car for the long trip to Clearfield. The employees' personal railroad cars for both eating and sleeping, and the Straits' private living car were parked on a railroad siding near the New York Central Yard. Originally, the Straits show was organized and owned by James E. Strates, a former professional wrestler. When he passed away, his son, E. James Strates, took over operation of the show, but it is now run mostly by third-generation children. It is the only carnival show which is still traveling on rails. This show business has been very successful. I came to know both James E. and E. James Strates while serving on the Clearfield County Fair Board. We sometimes keep in touch through email and visit together occasionally. We have traveled together in his airplane. He wanted a co-pilot along. He is the only pilot I know who made his first solo flight in a twin-engine airplane. A Clearfield resident, Jim Dillman, spent part of his career helping to manage the show. He has accumulated a fine collection of posters and photos of the Strates shows and now lives in Tampa. After the show entertained Clearfield for a week, it was time to reload the train, elephants and all, then move on to their next spot. Computers. I remember when, and maybe you do too, a time when there were no computers anywhere. They were yet to be invented. One of the tasks that computers have improved upon is recording and storing information. In prior times, this office task was performed with a typewriter. The information was typed on a sheet of paper, which was then inserted in a file folder, and the folder was named and placed alphabetically in a filing cabinet for future access. With a computer, the info is typed into an electronic document or file and saved for future use. Another task computers can do better is copying. With typewriters, you can make only about 5 or 6 copies using carbon paper inserted between blank pages. If you strike the wrong typing key, then you have to erase all 6 copies of the mistake. For a larger number of copies, up to about 50, there are machines called mimeographs or duplicators, which use a gel applicator and special ink and papers. With a computer, once the data is typed in a document, it is sent to a printer and any amount of copies can be produced quickly. Another task your personal computer can do much quicker is sorting, either numerically or alphabetically. Previously, it took a lot of time to manually sort names or files. Computers sort extremely fast. Here's an example of that speed. I help maintain a list of the names etched on bricks at the Bison Memorial Wall near the Market Street Bridge. This list, together with a note on the location in the wall of each brick, is kept on a disc in the Clearfield Library, where people can determine where their brick is located. In June of 2016, there were 6,646 62 bricks with names. In July 2016, 54 more names were added. I typed a list of the 54 names together with their locations and added them at the bottom of the master list of 6,662 names. I prompted the computer to sort all the names alphabetically. In less than 3 seconds, the computer showed a list of 6,716 names, all in alphabetical order. How amazing! My pocket computer. I remember when nobody had cell phones. All our phones were connected together by wires called phone lines on telephone poles and through telephone exchanges. Now invention has changed the way we make calls. That thing in your hand or in your pocket or purse that we call a cell phone is actually a pocket computer. We do use it as a telephone and to send and receive email, messages, and pictures. It's partly a communication. It's partly a communication device, but it's so much more. We use that device for many other needs. A, it keeps an alphabetical list of friends and other people with their home address, phone number, and email address. B, it has a clock which never needs winding or setting, and a calendar to keep us on time. C, the camera takes photos and can store 1,000 pictures for recall anytime. D, it has a calculator to perform your math problems. E, it's a compass to show magnetic directions. F, if you can read, see, and hear the latest news on its screen. G, it will give you weather and moving radar maps. H, kids can play games and solve puzzles with it. I, this pocket computer can record your walking mileage and number of steps you took today, this week, month, or year. J, it has a voice recorder for reminders or memos of things we don't want to forget. K, this gadget will also alert you about upcoming events so you don't forget. L, it has dictionary capability to obtain correct spelling or the definition of words. M, it has GPS, Global Positioning System, giving you vocal directions to help you find your destination while driving. You don't need to take your eyes off the road. N, there's a program named Google, which is an expanded encyclopedia and will give you answers to almost any question. I use the GPS for navigation while flying in my airplane. It is the feature I like best of all on my cell phone. It provides my exact location on an aviation chart or on a satellite view of the ground. It also shows my airspeed, my compass heading, the miles to my destination, and my current altitude. It tells me how much fuel I have used and the ETA, estimated time of arrival, at my destination. I still have much to learn about this handheld apparatus. I know nothing about synchronizing and some other features. I don't listen to music or radio on it, and I seldom play the games, but I do like using the other modern programs or apps that I have learned on my pocket computer